The story begins with a couple entering an abandoned house. They go up to the bedroom and, while Tina heads to the bathroom, Rowan goes downstairs to prepare dinner. As she comes out, Tina sees her boyfriend standing by the window and tries to get his attention, but he doesn't respond and completely ignores her. Suddenly, the real Rowan walks in through the door, and that's when Tina realizes that what she saw was some kind of ghost. She tries to tell him what happened, but Rowan doesn't believe her and thinks she's just trying to scare him. However, when Tina goes down to the kitchen and approaches the window to close the curtains, she sees the same ghost again. This time, the situation becomes more tense. Suddenly, the lights go out and Rowan turns on a flashlight to check the place. That's when both of them come face to face with the spirit that haunts the house, and they are attacked. From that moment on, rumors about Nath Villa begin to spread. Because of this, the caretaker, Jagan, is ordered to temporarily shut down the house, despite the protests of Anthony, who had offered to live there and take care of the place. A year later, a family arrives in the city and tries to get a taxi to take them to their new home. But no driver is willing to go to Nath Villa, as it is now known as a haunted house. After some insistence, Kiran agrees to take them. During the ride, he advises Aditya to look for another place to rent, since it is said that a vengeful spirit lives there. Upon hearing this, Banku gets scared and moves closer to his mother, but Anjali reassures him and tells him there's nothing to worry about. As they get closer to the house, the driver stops before reaching it and tells them they'll have to walk from there. The family continues on foot until they arrive at the residence, where they are welcomed by Jagan, who shows them around. Before signing anything, Aditya asks about the rumors he's heard since arriving in the city. But Jagan dismisses them and assures him that the house is only empty because its owner moved to the United States. Once the caretaker leaves, the family begins settling into their new home. Anjali prepares sandwiches for dinner, and while they eat, none of them notice that someone is watching them. Days later, Aditya says goodbye to his family to go to work. As a chief engineer on a ship, he has to travel constantly and can spend months away from home. On Monday, Anjali takes her son to school, where the new student is welcomed by the principal, who is known for keeping the lunches that mothers send with their children. Then, Banku takes him to the classroom and introduces him to his classmates. During recess, Banku is chased by a boy named Jojo, and from that moment on, a rivalry begins between them. Meanwhile, back at the house, Anjali is putting away the groceries. But when she turns around to grab the rest, she realizes that some items have disappeared from the counter. Looking toward the window, she spots a man stealing the food. Without thinking, she grabs a piece of wood and prepares to confront him. Noticing this, Anthony tries to escape, but she chases after him. He tries to calm her down by saying he was just looking for something to eat, but that only makes her angrier when she realizes he's a thief. After a long chase, they both stop to catch their breath, but in the middle of the moment, Anthony accidentally breaks some plates that were inside a box, so Anjali ends up kicking him out of the house. Back at school, during art class, Jojo takes advantage of the fact that Banku is distracted and ruins his drawing. In response, Banku ends up staining Jojo's shirt with paint, but it turns out to be invisible ink that disappears after a few seconds. Trying to impress his classmates, Banku says his father brought it from South Africa, and Jojo convinces him to use it to stain another student's uniform. While waiting for the right moment, Banku gets ready to throw the paint, but ends up splashing it directly onto the principal. To make things even worse, Jojo had deliberately switched the paint containers to get the boy in trouble. Banku realizes the ink isn't disappearing as it should, understands it was sabotage, and his mother is quickly called to the principal's office. When Anjali sees the principal completely covered in paint, she can't help but laugh, surprised by what her son has done. Even so, she tries to stay serious, scolds him, and assures the principal that Banku will behave better from now on. When she finds out everything happened because Jojo switched the paints, she makes the two boys make peace and even invites Jojo to her house to play with Banku. However, when he learns that Banku lives in Nath Villa, Jojo refuses to go. since the place has a reputation for being haunted. Despite all the rumors, Anjali doesn't believe in ghosts and continues her life as usual. That night, she goes to bed next to her son while Aditya is away on a work trip. In the middle of the night, Banku wakes up because of a bright light shining directly into his eyes. Curious, he gets up and follows a shadow that appears on the wall. He walks downstairs and heads to the refrigerator to grab a tub of ice cream. As he starts eating, he suddenly comes face to face with the ghost. Terrified, he begins calling for his mother, but by the time Anjali arrives, the ghost has already disappeared. Seeing that her son was eating ice cream without permission, she gets angry and sends him back to his room. Back in bed, Banku can't fall asleep as he realizes the ice cream container has vanished. Confused, he decides to go downstairs again to look for it, but ends up chasing the tub as it moves on its own around the house. In the middle of that chase, the boy runs into a strange man and quickly hides. However, noticing that he doesn't seem dangerous, Banku approaches him and asks who he is. The man replies that he is the spirit that lives in the house and claims that the place belongs to his family, so he and his mother should leave. The ghost tries to scare him, but quickly realizes his plan isn't working. Banku doesn't react the way he expected, which leaves him confused. He even starts to wonder if the boy is actually afraid of him. To make sure he is still a ghost, he goes outside and scares a man passing by. When he sees him run away in terror, he confirms that he is still invisible and can still frighten people. The next morning, Banku tries to tell his mother what happened during the night and says that he now has a new friend. But Anjali doesn't believe him and assumes it was all a dream, so she sends him to school like any other day. Later, Anjali finds Anthony wandering outside the house and decides to hire him to help with cleaning. Since no one else wants to work at Nath Villa while he is sweeping the dry leaves, the ghost starts bothering him, moving the vegetation and dragging it back toward the entrance. Anthony thinks someone is playing a prank on him, so he goes inside to talk to Anjali. But as soon as he opens the door, all the leaves start flying inside, creating a complete mess. As a result, Anjali ends up scolding him. Despite that, Anthony tries to keep working to earn some money, but the ghost does everything possible to ruin his work. When one of the vases is found broken, Anjali loses her patience and kicks him out again. Tired of everything that's happening, Anjali calls her husband and tries to convince him to come back so they can move somewhere else. Banku notices how stressed his mother is, so he decides to do something to help. Very early in the morning, he waits for the ghost and challenges him to a sort of contest. In this way, he manages to convince him to cooperate and help clean the house and put everything in order. Thanks to his powers, the ghost cleans the entire house in a matter of seconds. He makes the dry leaves disappear, removes the cobwebs, and rearranges the furniture as if nothing had happened. After checking that everything is perfect, Banku goes back to his room to rest since he has school the next day. In the morning, Anjali is surprised to see the house completely clean and organized. Without thinking too much about it, she assumes Anthony was the one who did all the work and decides to pay him for the good service. While she prepares breakfast, Banku is playing alone on the terrace. He is practicing cricket when, suddenly, the ball falls down to the lower floor. As he approaches the stairs to retrieve it, the boy is startled when the ghost suddenly appears, causing him to lose his balance. Seeing him fall, the spirit tries to catch him, but his hand passes right through Banku's body, unable to do anything. The boy tumbles down the stairs and loses consciousness. Anjali immediately rushes to help him, while the ghost desperately tries to do something, even though she cannot see him. Shortly after, Banku is taken to the hospital. There, Anjali explains what happened, and the doctor orders an MRI to rule out any internal damage. After the examination, the doctor informs her that the boy has no serious injuries, but he still hasn't woken up. The next morning, after nearly 24 hours, Banku finally regains consciousness. When asked what happened, he says he simply slipped on the stairs while trying to retrieve his ball. At that moment, Anjali steps out to call her husband, and the ghost takes the opportunity to approach Banku and apologize for not being able to save him. That same day, Jagan receives a call from Vijay Nath, the owner of Nath Villa, who informs him that he will return to the city the following week. Since Banku was discharged from the hospital, the ghost decides to change his attitude. He promises to stop scaring people and to start using his powers for good. From that point on, he even begins to take better care of his appearance and accompanies Banku to school, even though he knows no one else can see him. Gradually, he also starts caring about how he looks and becomes a kind of support for the boy, especially in sports. During a school competition, Banku places second in the long jump and performs poorly in the other events. Frustrated, he asks the ghost for help to win the hurdles race, but the ghost refuses to cheat. Instead, he encourages him and helps him build confidence in himself. Thanks to that support, Banku manages to win the competition. Upset about losing the prize of bicycle, Jojo decides to get revenge. Along with some classmates, he plans a trap to lure Banku and prove whether the supposed ghost is really helping him. However, things don't go as expected, and as they approach a well, Jojo himself falls inside while his friends abandon him. Shortly after, Banku passes by riding his new bicycle and hears Jojo shouting for help. He goes over to assist him, but while trying to pull him out, he realizes it was all part of a trap to test him. This makes him angry, and he decides to leave without helping. But the ghost stops him and advises him to forgive Jojo. Following his advice, Banku reaches out his hand, and at that moment, something strange happens. His arm stretches unnaturally until it reaches Jojo. That's how he manages to pull him out of the well. Afterward, Banku asks him not to tell anyone what happened, but Jojo doesn't keep his promise. When rumors begin to spread at school, the principal calls Anjali again and warns her that if Banku continues telling ghost stories, he will have to be transferred to another school. When they get home, his mother scolds him, so the boy decides to keep everything related to the ghost a secret. However, the following week, during a school play, Banku decides to recreate the night he met the spirit. For most people, it seems like just a made-up story. But among the audience, Jojo's mother claims that the boy has described someone who matches the appearance of Kailash Nath, the supposed ghost of Nath Villa back when he was alive. At that moment, Anjali begins to consider that maybe her son was telling the truth when he talked about a ghost. That same day, Jagan visits Vijay Nath, the son of Kailash Nath, and discovers that he plans to sell his father's house to a businessman. However, before closing the deal, the buyer wants to see the property in person, so he arrives with his lawyers and enters the house without Anjali's permission. She tries to stop them, but at that moment, the ghost intervenes. Filled with anger, he uses his powers to scare them. Suddenly, the floor and walls begin to shake, and doors and windows rattle violently as if it were an earthquake, though it only affects the house. Terrified, the buyers run out, and once they are gone, everything returns to normal. After that, Banku starts talking to the ghost and manages to convince him to reveal himself to his mother. When he finally appears, the spirit decides to explain the real reason why he is trapped in the house. He says that years ago, his son Vijay moved to the United States for work, and from that moment on, his wife was never the same. She spent her days sitting on the porch waiting for her son or by the phone, hoping for a call that almost never came. Over time, she passed away. During the funeral, Vijay returned with his wife and son. When the child saw his grandfather, he ran to hug him, and in that moment, Kailash couldn't hold back his tears. Weeks later, Kailash found out that his son was trying to sell the house without his consent, and he managed to stop the sale. Vijay wanted to take his father to live with him in the United States, but Kailash refused. Since that place held a very special meaning for him, it was where he had spent his life with his wife. So he chose to stay while his son returned abroad. The next day, during their farewell, Kailash held tightly onto his grandson and didn't want to let go. But his daughter-in-law pulled him away from the child, and Vijay left with his family. As he watched them go, Kailash tried to follow them, but he tripped on the stairs and fell. After the fall, he got up, trying to speak to his son one last time, but it was already too late. Vijay got into a taxi heading to the airport. Confused, Kailash returned to the house, and that's when he saw his own body at the bottom of the stairs. In that moment, he realized he had died. Since then, he has remained in the house as a spirit, scaring away anyone who tries to live there. But everything changed when he met Banku. Even so, he has not been able to forgive his son. The resentment he feels for being abandoned keeps him tied to that place, and now he even wants Banku to stay there with him forever. Hearing this, Anjali panics at the thought that her family might end up trapped in the house, unable to leave. Sometime later, Aditya returns home and, after seeing the ghost with his own eyes, decides to go with his wife to a temple to ask for help. The priest explains that the only way for Kailash's soul to rest in peace is by performing a post-mortem ritual. Since Vijay was abroad and did not return for his father's funeral, no one carried out the ritual, which is why his spirit remains trapped on Earth. Upon learning that Vijay is in the city, Aditya decides to look for him and talk to him. However, the man does not believe in ghost stories. He is determined to sell the house and leave for good, as he doesn't want anything tying him to that place. When Aditya discovers that Vijay plans to leave soon, he tries to convince him to at least apologize to his father before departing. But Vijay stands firm, clinging to his pride and insisting that he has nothing to apologize for. At that moment, Aditya tells Vijay that his family is organizing a ceremony so that Kailash's soul can finally rest in peace, and even invites him to take part. But Vijay replies that in the United States, it is not common to perform such rituals and that, even so, souls still move on. Because of that, he refuses to get involved and assures that he will return the next day only to pick up the keys to Nath Villa. When Aditya returns home, he tells his son about the ritual they are going to perform. Excited, Banku runs to share the news with Kailash. When the ghost hears this, he promises that he will always watch over him from wherever he is and asks him to never forget him. The next morning, the priest arrives at the house to begin the ceremony alongside the family, and Jojo's parents are also present, as they were close to Kailash. During the ritual, Banku convinces the ghost to stay nearby and be with them. Kailash watches the boys' every move closely, as if he knows this might be the last moment they share. Suddenly, Kailash freezes completely when he sees his son walk through the door. He hasn't seen him since the day he died. Vijay goes upstairs, enters his parents' old room, and upon seeing his mother's portrait, breaks down in tears as he hugs it. Then he comes back down and joins the others, taking part in the ceremony and praying for his father's soul to rest in peace. Seeing this, something changes within Kailash. He finally manages to forgive his son and feels ready to leave. At that moment, the ghost begins to fade away. Realizing this, Banku stands up in desperation to look for him, as he never imagined the ritual would mean saying goodbye to him forever. He thought it would only help save his soul, not that he would lose him. When he understands what is truly happening, the boy hugs his mother and breaks down in tears. This deeply moves Vijay, who finally realizes that his father's spirit had been there all along. Filled with regret, he decides to make things right. As a final gesture, he gives the house to Banku, convinced that this is what his father would have wanted. In the end, Banku runs up to the rooftop and looks up at the sky. There, he sees how the spirit of his friend transforms into a star, one that will stay with him forever.